A major issue in the public school system is how students are graded. How did the grading system we all know today come to be? When each student simply went to their local school and met with one teacher, communicating with feedback was enough. Teachers would group students based on quality of work, but much of that was kept from the students to avoid competition between them. But compulsory schooling meant that there needed to be a universal way to communicate a student's achievement. Eventually, things like honor rolls and merit lists came to be, and people thought that this would mean students would all work harder and teaching them would be easier because they would be embarrassed or wanted to do well. Report cards in the 1800s also provided a way to look at a child's abilities over time rather than on one public quiz, which was the norm before this. With the turn of the century, a more industrialized world came a more industrialized school system. It wasn't possible any longer for teachers to give detailed feedback to their students and report on a student's learning. Students had to be tracked in a more systematic way. Eventually, the 4.0 GPA scale and the 100-point system, with ranges of points being represented by the letters A through F, emerged. Yale University then adopted the plus and minus additions to letter grades for more accurate sorting of students in the 1960s, and K through 12 schools soon followed. It's a system that educators and students of today have always known, and might seem like it's here to stay. But yet, teachers and students have found issue with the standardized grading practices pretty much from the start. A survey in 1964 indicated that grades represented different things to different people, and different teachers could teach the same class and produce dramatically different grade distributions. In 1971, only 16% of elementary school teachers thought that letter grades were the best for reporting student success, and only 35% of secondary school teachers agreed. The fact that these feelings have been lingering for 50 years means it's clear a move away from this factory model of grading is needed. Every teacher understands the need to communicate to parents and students how the child is performing. It's not enough to come to work and collect without collecting and reporting progress. Standards-based grading is a way for teachers to do both of these things. Rather than focusing on a cumulative grade of a mix of assignments, standard-based grading allows teachers to report progress on specific standards, learning goals, and content. A standard defines what a student should know, understand, and be able to do, and they communicate the expected end of grade or end of course skills to be mastered. And the fact that it's end of grade or end of course is important, and we can talk about that. In traditional grading, students are given tests, quizzes, projects, and homework assignments. All of these things average together, and a final score for the subject is given. But teachers can look at these things in different ways and grade differently. A student might have a math teacher who determines final grades from quizzes and daily assignments. Another might count participation in homework as a significant part. Another might use attendance and the final exam as major portions. And another might take off points for late assignments, even if they demonstrate full understanding of the material. These inconsistencies mean that more teachers are starting to question these traditional practices. But with standards-based grading, proficiency levels of students are ongoing, and they're subject to change over time as the student is given more opportunity to practice and master the skills. This type of reporting lends itself really well to differentiated learning because students who master the standards can move on to more advanced things, whereas students who need more time and instruction on a certain standard can receive it. So, with standard-based grading, rather than creating unit tests and assigning projects and homework that all contain an array of skills, and then grading them to find an average, the teacher begins the school year thinking about target goals. The gradebook, rather than consisting of test and assignment names, would instead contain the learning goals that the students should master, such as these standards. These grades would then fluctuate and change throughout the reporting period so that students are given an opportunity to practice and try again and get better at the standards. This goes back to how we view the standards. Giving them a chance to get better. If the standards represent the end of the course or the end of grade goals, then how come students don't get the entire course or the entire grade to master them? Most teachers give a test at the end of a chapter or a unit, students receive grades, and then the entire class moves on. So essentially you're punishing students who are taking longer to understand the material. Currently, we are rewarding when a student learns a concept rather than how deeply. So to assume that every student will have arrived at the same point on the learning progression with a concept or skill is rather senseless, and it's also not fair to give students who finally understand the material only C's and D's on their report card just because they didn't master it in time. Some school districts have already begun to try this to mixed results. 12 teachers in a Midwestern suburban school spent a year using standards-based grading and reported that they became better teachers because of using data to drive instruction, differentiation, the use of rubrics, feedback, and one-on-one conferring. But not all teachers felt the same way. Teachers in Osseo public schools spoke out against standards-based grading. They said that they didn't have enough time or enough resources to implement it, and that it was allowing for children to turn in late assignments because there was a lack of penalty. This would certainly need to be addressed. Is there something to be said for penalizing late work to teach students about responsibility and deadlines? Are grades the way to teach those characteristics? There's also the fact that many parents and students would be unfamiliar with the system of grading, and there would be a big learning curve. In the end, a teacher has to carefully consider what they're hoping to report when they assign a grade to a student. If they hope to report on not only understanding of the material, but work ethic, timeliness, and a variety of other factors, the traditional grading system still works for them. But if a student hopes to carefully and critically look at the learning of each student individually, not when compared to their peers or placed in competition, then standard-based grading works. This allows for teachers to collect and report on data and information about a student's mastery of the content. Standards-based grading doesn't hold students to a standardized timeline of learning the material before moving on. It allows them to work continuously to master their goals. There's still much to consider that standards-based grading perhaps can't address, such as assessing and reporting on other things we hope to instill in students, such as responsibility, attentiveness, and promptness. But overall, it's clear that the traditional grading system is not doing so well in accurately measuring and reporting on these things either. Perhaps standards-based grading is a way to fairly assess all students, and genuine feedback and conversation among teachers and parents and students can be enough.